Today we have The Hatmaker Sign, a story by Benjamin Franklin as retold by Candace Fleming. And Benjamin Franklin, he was an inventor, a statesman, a scientist, a printer, and a postmaster here in America. And not to forget, he was also a grand storyteller. And in this story he's speaking with Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence. At last! After endless hours of scribbling and struggling, Thomas Jefferson had written it. And it was perfect! Every word rang, every sentence sang, every paragraph flowed with truth. "It is exactly right," Jefferson exclaimed. "The Continental Congress will surely love it." But the next morning, after Jefferson's wonderful words had been read aloud, the Congress broke into a noisy debate. "I do not like this word," quibbled one delegate. "Let's replace it." "And this sentence," argued another. "I think we should cut it." "What about this paragraph?" shouted another still. "It must be removed." While the Continental Congress argued about him, Thomas Jefferson slumped into his chair. His face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. "I thought my words were just perfect the way they were," he muttered to himself. Just then, he felt a consoling pat on his shoulder. He looked up into the sympathetic eyes of Benjamin Franklin. "Tom," Benjamin Franklin said, smiling, "this puts me in mind of a story." In the city of Boston, on a cobblestone street, a new hat shop was opening for business. All stood ready. Comfortable chairs had been placed before polished mirrors, wooden hat boxes were stacked against one wall, and the front window was filled with tricorns and top hats, coonskins, and wool caps. There was only one thing the hat shop did not have: a sign. But the hat maker, John Thompson, he was working on it. Knee-deep in used parchment and broken quill pens, John struggled to create a sign for his shop, and at long last he wrote one. It read, "John Thompson, hat maker. Fashionable hats sold inside for ready money." Beneath the words, John drew a picture of a hat. "It is exactly right," John exclaimed. "Customers will surely love it." But before hurrying to the sign maker's shop, where his words and picture would be printed onto board, John showed his parchment to his wife, Hannah. "Oh, John," Hannah giggled after reading what John had written, "why bother with the words 'for ready money'? You're not going to sell hats for anything else, are you? Remove those words, and your sign will be perfect." "You're probably right," sighed John. So John rewrote his sign. Now it read, "John Thompson, hat maker. Fashionable hats sold inside." Beneath the words, he drew a picture of a hat. Parchment in hand, John headed for the sign maker's shop. He had gone as far as the Old North Church when he met Reverend Brimstone. "Where are you strolling on such a fine morning?" asked the Reverend. "To the sign maker's shop," replied John. He held out his parchment, and Reverend Brimstone read it. "May I make a suggestion?" he asked. "Why don't you take out the words 'John Thompson, hat maker'? After all, customers won't care who made the hats, so long as they are good ones." "You are probably right," sighed John, and after tipping his tricorn to the Reverend, John hurried back to his hat shop and rewrote his sign. Now it read, "Fashionable hats, sold and signed." Beneath the words, he drew a picture of a hat. Parchment in hand, John headed for the sign maker's shop. He had gone as far as Beacon Hill when Lady Manderley stepped from their carriage and into his path. "What have you there?" asked the haughty lady. She plucked the parchment from John's hand and read it. "Absurd!" she snorted. "Why bother with the words 'fashionable'? Do you intend to sell unfashionable hats?" "Absolutely not!" cried John. "Then strike out that word," replied Lady Manderley. "Without it, your sign will be perfect." "You are probably right," sighed John, and after kissing the lady's elegant gloved hand, John hurried back to his sign shop and wrote his sign. And now it read, "Hats, sold and signed." Beneath the words, he drew a picture of a hat. Parchment in hand, John headed for the sign maker's shop. He had gone as far as the Boston Common when he met a British magistrate. The magistrate, always on the lookout for unlawful behavior, eyed John's parchment. "Hand it over or face the stockades," demanded the magistrate. John did. He gulped nervously as the magistrate read it. Tell me, Hatter, bullied the magistrate, why do you write sold inside? Are you planning on selling your hats on the street? That is against the law, you know. I say delete those words if you want to stay out of jail, and if you want your sign to be perfect. Yes, sir, no, sir, I mean I will, sir, stammered John. And after hastily bowing to the magistrate, John hurried back to his hat shop and rewrote his sign. And now it read, hats. Beneath the word, John drew a picture of a hat. Parchment in hand, John headed over for the sign maker's shop. He had gone as far as the Charles River, when a brisk breeze snatched the parchment from his hand and dropped it at the feet of two young apprentices sitting on a crate of tea. The first apprentice picked up the parchment and read it. "Hey, mister," he said, "why do you write hats when you already have a picture of one?" "Yes, why?" asked the second apprentice. "It would be a much better sign without that word," suggested the first apprentice. "It would be perfect," added the second apprentice. "Well, you are probably right," sighed John. And after tossing each boy a halfpenny, John hurried back to his hat shop and wrote his sign. And now it read, nothing. He drew a picture of a hat. Parchment in hand, John headed back for the sign maker's shop. He had gone as far as Harvard College when he met Professor Wordsworth. John shoved the parchment under the professor's nose. "Please, sir," he said, "would you please tell me what you think of my sign?" The surprised professor straightened his spectacles and peered into the picture. "Since you ask my opinion, I shall give it," said Professor Wordsworth. "However, I must ask you a question first. Are you displaying hats in your shop's front window?" John nodded. "Then this picture is useless," declared the professor. "Everyone will know you sell hats simply by looking into your window. Eliminate the picture and your sign will be perfect." "You are probably right," sighed John. And after pumping the professor's hand in thanks, John hurried back to his hat shop and rewrote his sign. But now, it read nothing. It showed nothing. It was wordless and pictureless and entirely blank. Parchment in hand, John headed to the sign maker's shop. Past the North Church and Beacon Hill, past Boston Common and the Wharf and Harvard College. At long last, John arrived at the sign maker's shop. Exhausted, he handed over his parchment. "I do not understand," said the puzzled sign maker as he stared at the empty parchment. "What does this mean? What are you trying to say?" John shrugged. That's all he could do. "I do not know anymore," he admitted. And he told the sign maker about his new hat shop and his sign, and how no one had thought it was perfect enough. When he had finished, the sign maker said, "May I make a suggestion? How about John Thompson, Hatmaker, fashionable hats sold inside for ready money. Beneath the words, I shall draw a picture of a hat." "Yes!" exclaimed John. "How clever of you to think it! That is exactly right. Indeed, it's perfect." "So you see, Tom," concluded Benjamin Franklin, "no matter what you write or how well you write it, if the public is going to read it, you can be sure they will want to change it." For several moments, Thomas Jefferson pondered Franklin's story. Then, sighing with acceptance, he listened as the Congress argued over the words that rang, the sentences that sang, and the paragraphs that flowed with truth. And surprisingly, when the debate was done and the changes were made, most believed Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence was exactly right. Indeed, they thought it was perfect. And have you ever had a time, and how would you feel if everything you did and you put into a particular work, someone always had to find fault with? And then as you looked back on it, after some time later, perhaps you thought, well, why were all those changes made in the first place? Was it because people just wanted to find change, or were they really better off for it? And if you could see your work again with new eyes, what would you think of it? I encourage you to write something of your own and ask people what they think, and keep many editions of it from what each person's suggestion. And then perhaps a month later, look back on it and see what you think.